A seguir, a próxima oradora falará em inglês. O tema em português poderá ser traduzido por Demistificar os seus dados e é-nos comunicado aqui por Safa Ghnaim. Depois haverá um pequeno debate moderado pela jornalista Luciana da revista Exame de Informática.
Hello, great, okay. Thank you so much for sticking around for my presentation. I feel really honored to follow the stage after so many amazing experts have spoken about these topics, and I hope that I can bring something new to you. So today, in my talk, I'm gonna shed light on data, and I know that we have really gotten in depth with the speakers on different policies, different regulations. It's gotten quite far, but what my purpose is here is to take a step back and to look at what even is data. So why don't we start there? I want you to know this session, I'm gonna try to make it a little bit interactive. So I'm gonna ask you to raise your hands at certain points. I'm gonna ask you, to stretch a little bit, basically. So hopefully you can be a little bit animated before lunch. But I also want to have a disclaimer as well that my approach to this topic and the whole project I work on is to make these complex topics more simplistic, more easy to understand. So if it turns out that I am telling you a lot of things that you already know, I hope that you can still learn from the way that we're talking about it and hopefully become inspired to, train your colleagues, your family, and your friends in different ways. So let's talk about not only what data is, but how you can control your data online. I'm also going to tell you about where I work, what I do, and different projects we work on, because I really think it'll be interesting for you. So what does it mean to be private online? I think that this is a different answer for everyone. If you are the kind of person who thinks of privacy as not owning any technology, you're completely off the internet, and maybe your dream is to live in a boat in the middle of the ocean, raise your hand. Is that your idea of privacy? Yeah. The boat would be nice, yes. I saw a couple of hands, but yeah, not many people see privacy this way. I mean, if you do, that's okay. But for the rest of us, privacy is something that we aim to achieve while we're online, while we're using the internet to help us as tools, but not take over our lives. So take me for an example. I use social media and messaging apps to stay in touch with my family and friends. They're all over the world, and it's one of the easiest ways that I can do it. I use a browser, a search engine, email for my work. I have to. There's no way for me to get around it. I use a map, for example, to navigate around Lisbon when I come to visit, but also in my city in Berlin, I use a map to visit new places. Raise your hand if this is getting closer to you, how you use the internet. Okay. But I don't just use these smart tools. I also use technology to send cute pictures of animals to my friends. And I look up funny pictures of birds or funny videos of birds dancing to pop music. And the reason I bring you these examples is because these are just as important to me as the first examples I gave you. Technology, for me, it's not only functional, but it's emotional. These examples are things that get me through a sad winter day, or a rainy day, or a stressful day, and these are important to me as well. I use technology in my own way, and so do you. So my name is Safa Ghnaim. I work at Tactical Tech, which is a nonprofit organization in Berlin. And I'll tell you more details about it in a moment. And my job is, I am the project lead of the Data Detox Kit, which I'm also going to describe to you. But first, let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm just some random person coming up here talking to you in English. So my background is actually in libraries and in education. I am, number one, a facilitator, a teacher. And so privacy for me was a personal journey until I met my colleagues at Tactical Tech and started to work there, and it became my profession. So Tactical Tech, as I mentioned, is a nonprofit organization. It's been around since 2003. So for 17 years, it's been looking into the subject of privacy. Not only privacy, but just in general, the impacts of technology on society in different ways. And we do so in a variety of different projects with publications, exhibitions, camps, workshops. Our approach is that there are many different interested people in these topics. And so it's important that we use our variety of different backgrounds and creativity to bring this subject alive for people. I think that's something that Tactical Tech really excels in is using art and creativity to frame these more complicated topics. So I work specifically on the Data Detox Kit project. I'll be leading a workshop later, specifically starting your Data Detox Kit journey. And so what this has been around since 2017. It's a series of articles. We have it both online and in print, like this is one example of our print version. And it offers clear suggestions and concrete tips helping people to harness their online lives. Every piece of it, not only the privacy, but every other piece. So our hope is that by giving people the information and the steps, that people can make more informed choices and change their digital habits in ways that are right for them. Because it's the answer, as we discussed before, the answer is different for everyone. So there are 3 areas of focus in the Data Detox Kit. And as I mentioned, privacy is one of them. So our privacy articles, we look at how to change your settings in Facebook or Google to make them more private. Our security section looks more into how to set up a good password, how to use a password manager, but also what even is a password manager. We get into the fundamentals of it. And our well-being section is probably the most broad. So well-being looks at your relationship with technology, how often you touch your phone, how often you check your phone, how many notifications you have turned on. But there are also articles in the well-being area on how to spot fake news, how to spot designs that kind of trick you into clicking on certain buttons, maybe with flashing lights or colors or words. So the well-being area is quite a broad one that we're adding to. The Data Detox Kit is something that I'm always working on developing with my colleagues. We always write new articles. We recently released a voter's guide, which has 7 basic tips on how you can gain control of your data leading up to an election, for example. In Portuguese, we have just a few articles translated, but to see the whole inventory, just be sure to check the English website. Right now, the website is actually in 10 languages, which I'm really excited about to help more people learn about these topics. But it's not only about articles, it's about workshops and opportunities to share with people and to hear what other people have to say. So a big part of it are these data detox workshops, like the one that'll happen this afternoon. You know, typically I always look for partnerships to help lead, help develop workshops, or maybe just follow along the workshops that I've created, give me feedback, and sometimes they can develop that way. But also in distributing the Data Detox Kit. So, you know, as I open this presentation on how it's your tech in your own way, that's exactly the approach I take when I put together workshops, is that I want to make safe, open spaces so that no one is wrong. Everyone has a right to what they think that they want to give out, what they think they want to keep private. But along those lines, there's always an opportunity to learn something new. So maybe it's something that they didn't know was important that they were giving out. So, as I mentioned, I'm gonna ask you to play a game with me. So this game is called Spectrogram. Basically, what I'll do is I'm going to say a statement, and I want you to decide if you agree or disagree, or if you're not sure. If you absolutely agree, just point your arm. So everybody lift up one arm with your pointer finger. If you absolutely agree, you're gonna point that way. Absolutely yes. If you're not sure, point up. And if it's absolutely no, point over there. Kind of a good stretch, you know, stretch your back. So this can also be a spectrum as well. So the idea is, if it's not absolutely yes, you're kind of in the middle, maybe you point that way. You see? You're not totally no, but you're kind of no, so maybe you're up here. So I'm gonna give a statement, and I'd like everyone to point in that direction. And I think, you know, take a look around and see what the people around you think. So the first statement is, for you, I feel confident talking to others about data. Absolutely yes, not sure, absolutely no. There's a lot of yes, and actually a lot of not sure or in the middle. A few no's. Interesting. Okay, there's a lot of people in the middle here. Great. The second question, I know how my data is used. Okay. So now there's a lot more no's and a lot more in the middles. A few yeses, like that's great. Wonderful, okay. So this is the last one that I'll ask. I feel in control of my data. No, a lot of people didn't even wait. They just went straight for no. There's some maybes. Any yeses? I don't see any yeses, okay. A couple yeses. Okay. Some rare people. Great. So this is an activity that you can do with people. So, what do we mean when we talk about data? I mean, there were lots of people here who pointed that they knew, so bear with me while we all get on the same page. So, you know, data, sure, it can include your name, where you live, where you work, what your shopping habits are, but that's not all. Actually, there's a lot of things considered data or that fall into the category of data that it's not immediately obvious. There's a lot more complicated ways, more technical ways to explain it, but I prefer to look at it in a more basic way. Who, what, where, when, why, how. So data includes who you are, your name maybe, but other facts about you, but also who you know, who is in your social network, who you're related to, who you're working with, what you do, maybe for a job, for hobbies, but also what you value. For example, I follow Greta Thunberg on social media and I like her posts. That makes it clear that I value the environment or sustainability or activism. For example, where you go, this might be your location information. How about when? The time. When are you watching Netflix? When are you texting? When are you posting on social media? This helps to clarify who you are, the patterns that you follow. Are you watching Netflix only on the weekends or maybe every night after work? These are different. Why you like something. So this gets more complicated because it's not so clear A equals B. Why you like something is more complicated, and it's the same with how you choose, how you vote, maybe how you think. These are things that are kind of assumed about you, maybe based off of conclusions. It could be based on the other points, the patterns that they make about you. But then we can look at 3 categories of data. This is just really general, non-exhaustive. So one area is the information that you give out. Another area is the information that others are creating about you. And the last one are conclusions made about you. So let's look at examples of all of those. So for an example of information that you create, not only is this, as we were talking about things that I'm liking on social media. But there was a project that Tactical Tech along with ShareLab did a couple of years ago. And this is quite interesting. I posted the link here if you want to watch the video later. But if you search for browser histories online, you can find an article about it. So in 2015, a journalist called Mr. J came into the Tactical Tech offices, and he specifically wanted to write an article to see how easy or how much information his browser history gave away about him. And actually, Tactical Tech and ShareLab said, yes, we will help you do this. And within minutes of looking at the browser history, within just minutes, they were able to find out not only who Mr. J was, information about where he worked, where he lived, in terms of the country he lived, the city he lived, where he was traveling to, but also part of his social graph. They were able to put together within just moments of glancing at a list of websites that he went to, who he knew, who was probably a friend, who was probably a colleague, maybe someone who, oh, okay, this person must be related to him. And it's quite although it's a couple years old, it's still quite a startling reminder of how easy it is for people to learn things about something as basic as a list of websites. A simple example of information you create might be something like when you sign up, when you purchase an airline ticket. You know, you put in your name, your passport number, your credit card number. This is just a basic example. Information that others create about you, I think the most obvious example is when people tag you in a post on social media. You know, like when you go out to a cafe with someone and they take a picture of their hamburger and then they tag you in the photo, and then everybody knows that you went to this cafe. But it's also other things. For example, when I go to the doctor, they have a central database server where they post all of the notes, all of the blood test results, and depending on how secure or insecure that is, that's still my data that's out there. And finally, this is my favorite example of conclusions made about you. So there's a movie on Netflix called A Christmas Prince. And this is just some romantic movie. It's harmless, honestly. Netflix posted a tweet a couple of years ago saying, to the 53 people who have watched A Christmas Prince every day for the past 18 days, who hurt you? Yeah, at first glance, I thought this was quite funny, but I have to admit, the more I thought about it, the creepier it got. I mean, a lot of people thought it was funny. There were 100,000 retweets. Crazy. But the reason I realized that it was a little bit darker and is a good example of conclusions made about you is because this completely harmless romantic movie, unrealistic, it made Netflix think that people were depressed, that people were unhappy. And I think this is a really, although superficial, it's a very good example of how something like this, which might turn into movie recommendations for another sad love story. This wasn't even sad, but it might turn into that. But how far can it go? Maybe it starts out as movie recommendations, it turns into purchase recommendations for an e-commerce website, but actually it can go as far as helping a data broker build a pattern of you and try and figure out who you might vote for in the next election or how they might best sway your vote to someone else. So it's kind of amazing how far it can go. So what can we do? I think that as fun as it is to share these wild stories and to freak people out, I think it's really important to share concrete steps that you can do. So the Data Detox Kit is full of these steps. I'm just going to share one of my favorites here. So what I'd like you to do is take out your smartphone. If it's not already out, feel free to take it out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the problem, and I'm going to post instructions on how you can change it on your phone. You can change it right now in the session. You can take pictures, and you can change it over lunch on your own time. It's up to you. So, does your weather app need access to your contacts? Sometimes apps are greedy. They are greedy. And so a good question to ask yourself of any app that you allow to live on your phone or that you have the control, because sometimes we don't, is, does it need this permission to function? So here's the example of a weather app having access to contacts, but maybe it's your movie streaming app that has access to your microphone. Maybe it's your car sharing app that has access to your camera. Does it need it to function? So here are some steps, what you can do. You can turn off any permissions that an app doesn't need to function. And don't worry, if you end up turning off too many permissions, typically you can turn them back on again or you can reinstall the app. This is a very low risk thing to do. So in Android, you go into your settings and apps, and then you go through every single app to see what the permissions are to turn them on and off. But with iPhone, it's a bit different because I don't have an iPhone, but apparently you go through settings, privacy, and then you find the permission, and then you find a list of apps that have that permission turned on. So if you want to change location, it'll give you a list of those. So I'll give you a moment right now to follow along on your phone and become familiar with what permissions you're giving away. I'm glad that you have your phone out. Good. So I think maybe some of you might have noticed that you have a lot of apps on your phone. So this isn't an easy thing to do, but of course, take your time with it. Maybe you'll find that there are some apps that you want to uninstall or that you don't use. So really take your time. This is a good lunchtime activity. So as I mentioned, the Data Detox Kit is full of these types of tips, these really basic things that we can kind of make a difference with. They're easy to follow, and I actually write them specifically for people in a hurry. Okay, I'm gonna change the screen. So right now the Data Detox Kit is written specifically for an adult audience, but actually I have a colleague who is currently reframing the articles for a youth audience for 10 to 16-year-olds specifically. And not only is she reframing what is already there, but she's found that there's a lot of topics to add that are really important for kids. So for example, she's gonna add an article about how the internet never forgets. You might delete something, but it's always there. It's living somewhere. Also on online identities, on what to share online, what to keep hidden, to keep a secret, and so much more. And she's also looking for partners to help her co-develop and compile resources, but also because she's creating material for teachers specifically, she's looking for people who can test out her materials and give her feedback to make it better. And while I'm on the topic of my other colleagues, I think this is a great time to tell you about some of the other projects that we do, because I do think that you'll be interested in them. So the first one I'm gonna tell you about is the Glass Room. So the Glass Room is an immersive self-learning exhibition. It's really an experience. We have several different versions. The one pictured here is one of our bigger glass rooms, which we've only done in Berlin, New York, London, and recently in San Francisco. And the big exhibition has these beautiful art pieces and videos and posters, and it really is designed to look like you are entering a technology store. Everything is white, so when people walk by, they typically don't know what they're coming into. We always put the big glass room on a shopping street, so when people walk by, they think they're coming into a new technology store to buy something. And then they find a free exhibition that's actually telling them about the other sides of technology, how it's used, how it's created. But at the same time, we don't want to give people a conclusion. We want people to come away with their own ideas and their own conclusions, because it's so important that people make that decision on their own. But also, we have smaller versions of the Glass Room, and it's like we have downstairs, which will open up in a little bit later today. So the smaller versions they're not so complex. They don't have the big art pieces, but they have really beautiful posters that go into depth on certain topics, and they have games as well. Both games like Connect the Dots, so it's interesting for kids, but also videos, and a game called Fake or Real, which has a variety of different apps and a variety of different uses of technology that sound crazy, like vibrating yoga pants, and you have to decide, is this real or fake? And we give you the answer. So the exhibition that we have downstairs is one of the different versions we have. Currently, the Glass Room team is producing a misinformation edition, which dives in depth into deep fakes, for example, into fake news specifically, into other forms of persuasion, like psychometric profiling, which is a whole topic on its own. But then there's also a community edition where they co-develop new materials with partners around the world. Another project that we have is Exposing the Invisible. So through a series of short films, video interviews, guides, resources, Exposing the Invisible looks at the techniques, tools, methods, and individual practices of those working on investigations. And the hope of Exposing the Invisible is that they will inspire a new generation who is committed to transparency and accountability. And every time I visit this website, I find something new. Just a couple more projects to tell you about. The Kit is a sort of offshoot from Exposing the Invisible, and this website promotes ethical and safe ways to seek answers, gather evidence, and bring new narratives forward. They encourage curiosity and creativity, and as they call it, seeing sideways, looking at things in a new way. And with the Kit, they consider that you are already an investigator, and they just help you do it in a safe way. And finally, my colleagues who work in the Data and Politics team, these are so politically active groups around the globe use tools and techniques, for example, marketing, psychology, statistics, to influence voters. And the Data and Politics team researches in depth and writes really amazing reports about, for example, political campaigns. They wrote a guidebook. It's all free. All of the stuff we do is nonprofit. It's all free. And they recently released a guidebook which goes through 14 methods that are used around the world in various countries to persuade votes and to push political agendas forward. And it's quite interesting to see that the same methods used in France are maybe used in Honduras, for example. So I encourage you, if you're interested on the effects of data in altering democracies, to go and take a look at their project. So finally, what are your next steps? What now? I'm really hoping that after this presentation, and if you are able to walk around the classroom later and join the workshop, that you can explore the Data Detox Kit and our other tactical tech projects. I also encourage you to visit the classroom at this conference. All of the posters are in Portuguese. When I give a guided tour, I'll speak in English, but at least the posters and the games will all be in Portuguese. And also let me know in case you would like any ideas on activities. Whenever I write a new article for the Data Detox Kit, I write it with a workshop in mind. So I'm happy to share ideas with you. And I'm also happy to hear your feedback. And also if you're interested in collaborating together. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Safa. E nesta manhã, que já vai muito longa, vamos agora passar à apresentação oficial.
Bom dia, meu nome é Hugo Sérmica, sou jornalista. Queria agradecer o convite para este debate. Sou jornalista da revista Exame Informática e a partir de agora acho que vou falar inglês até por motivos óbvios. Safa, nice to meet you. Portuguese journalist, I have the pleasure and honor to interview you. I think we have to restrict the questions to my questions. It will be poorly. I think it would be much more interesting to have the audience questions, but we don't have so much time, so we have to evolve with my questions. First of all, I have one easy question and open question. I have to ask you, do we feel effects of GDPR application in European Union? Do you think the landscape right now in terms of data protection has improved in the past 2 years?
It's a good question. My answer is kind of. And the reason I say that, oh yeah, it's somewhere in the middle here. And the reason I say that is that it was great that there was this push for transparency and a push for trying to get users to agree to things before it's collected. But the issue is that the perspective has been more with companies, how can I avoid a lawsuit? And not so much, how can I really make sure people understand? And how can I really make sure that they agree? Because as you know, you visit a website and you get a huge pop-up and your only real option is accept or leave the website. So in some ways, I think it's a step in the right direction, but there's still a long way to go.
Do you think it would be easier to have an easy to read formula that people just say, I want this, I don't want that? Do you think it would be mandatory? It should make sense to become mandatory, this kind of options in websites?
I think it helps. I think it's still missing part of the point. Like, I think it's good when there are these check boxes and you can say, I only want the necessary ones. But then there's still the question of what are the necessary ones? How are they stored? Is it secure? Is it really anonymous? So it's still not really answering all of our questions.
But still there are some questions like imagining Google Maps, if they don't have my localization, the place where I am, they cannot give me a service. So how can you create a balance between those two ways of seeing the localization?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And my, I guess, biggest advice is to look at the tools that you use, look at the services. And for example, if half of the services you use are Google, you can look into alternative apps. If for me, for example, when I need to use a map, I can use a non-Google map. I can use Osmond, I can use OpenStreetMaps. With some tools, it's a little bit harder. Maybe Google has the upper hand, like YouTube, that's where all the videos are. It's more difficult to go somewhere else, but with an app like a map or a messaging service or email, it's easy for me to make a transition to a privacy-oriented app.
Last question. With all these services gathering all the information, biometric, my taste, my preferences, my favorites, whatever, would it make it sense to create some digital mask that that would be legitimate to create a digital mask and to create even a false identification to browse the internet? Do you think in terms of technically or in terms of legislation that would be useful or viable?
I mean, that is tricky. And especially when we're in a room with educators, I know for youth in particular, it's not typically something that we encourage, that kids go on the internet and pretend that they're a 30-year-old man. You know, that's not something that we encourage, especially because of bullying online. It's helpful when everyone is clear about their age, but at the same time, it is really tricky because as an adult, I would like the option to be more anonymous or at least more undercover. So it's tricky answer. I think I'm not the best person to answer that.
Okay. Well, it's the resume debate. I think Professor Legato Martins, I think it's the job you asked me. So the next yes, that's because it's the delay. As long lamento chegar a ouvir a música, mas podem conversar com ela e ouvir o rol e que querem contribuir na additional
só dizer o que é que a iniciativa que hoje é associada, o que é que vamos fazer.
Sim, ok. Espero que tenham gostado. I hope you enjoyed also.
Thank you.
Thank you.